Mindful Coach podcast. Hello, this is Brett, the Mindful Coach, and today I've got something a little different. I did a webinar earlier today that was so fun on the future of coaching is somatic, and in this presentation, it's packed with details about how somatic skills can really help a coach or anyone who's working with other people in a professional environment where you're facilitating other people's growth, insights, and learning through the use of your own skills, your own presence, and your own practice. Bringing somatic skills into that communication, into that engagement is going to take you so much further than you can do otherwise. And this presentation is all about the why of that and some about the how as well. And so check it out. The future of coaching is somatic. Thank you. So I'd like to welcome you to this presentation on the future of coaching is somatic. I'm Brett Hill, and this is what I love about the work that I do is the somatic work. And by the term somatic, I'm talking about direct body-centered experience, directly connecting to what is my experience now of my body, and then that quickly extends itself to what are thoughts am I having, what emotions am I having. And this is an exceptionally powerful skill to have, to be able to go, oh, this is what I'm actually experiencing. And it's one that isn't really supported that well in the culture in terms of being able to give voice to that. It's one thing to turn your senses to your direct in the moment experience. It's another thing to be able to give voice to that. So that in and of itself as a personal skill is super transformational in terms of the way it changes your relationships and your conversations. Furthermore, it's an even, I would say, more advanced skill and powerful when you can help others learn to do that. And that's where the coaching comes in. Helping other people learn to connect and give voice to those kinds of experiences. That's been my passion for years now. And I've had the advantage of learning from some amazing, incredible teachers. And so I'm on a mission to kind of spread their goodness as best as I can to people. And this presentation is about how coaching can benefit dramatically from having a foundation in these skills. And so I'm going to share the screen and go through some content that I have created along these lines. And so basically, the first thing I like to do in these presentations is something like a transition, to transition a little bit between where we've been and what we're doing and where we are now. And so I just like to invite people to take a moment and transition. And by that, I mean just take a breath and whatever's been going on in your life. For me, I've had a technical snafu just getting this to work so I can do this presentation. So my nervous system is a little jumpy. And just taking a breath and noticing, what's it like to be you right now? And we're not going to go immersively into this, but just to take a moment and check in. Yeah, and pressing pause on your day to just honor the fact that of all the things in the world you could do, you've chosen to be here. So I invite you to let your attention come into this moment so that you can be present for what you've chosen to come to attend to. And just saying yes to being present here and now. And that all the things you have to do in your world, they'll still be there when we're done. And then when you're ready, we come back to our little group here. And then I also kind of like sometimes I check in a little bit like, do you feel a little different right this minute than just 2 minutes ago? I know I do. And that is really helpful. So in the training that I teach, which we'll talk about a little bit later, it's called reference for the preference. It's like helping people get a reference. Would it be better to interact with the world, your job, your people in your world, from a place where you're more settled, more connected, more grounded, more present, than one where you're kind of like all over the place? And of course, that's, the answer to that is yes. Of course, you'd want to be more present for your experience of life. And so it's one thing, though, to just say, oh, yeah, of course. It's another thing to experience it directly. And that's the difference between an idea and the somatic direct experience of something like that. And so just taking a moment to transition is in itself a valuable skill. Where we're at these days is like, is the screen still showing okay? I moved it here so I can see it better. Okay. Is that disconnection, and there's a tremendous amount of suffering in the world, is entirely unnecessary. And it's not because people want to be unhappy. It's just that there's a lot of, there's a lack of helping people understand how to better connect to their lives in such a way that that unhappiness is optional. So we ask, the world is constructed in a way where we're asking way too much of people for our nervous systems to accommodate. The rate, there's so much coming at us, so much information. If you've looked at the graphs of how much information is available to us, it's gone from like, a small amount to a gigantic amount in a very short period of time. So all this information becomes available, all the messaging that comes available, all the people wanting your attention, the complexity of our world is absolutely nuts. And it causes, there's a cost to that neurologically. And what isn't in the mix as face forward is, how do I navigate in this world with the nervous system that I have? Because we all have a similar nervous system. I mean, there's a lot of diversity within that bucket. But effectively, we have a brain, we have nerves, and we have muscular system and organ systems. And the brains typically seem to work kind of the same in a way for most people. They're bioelectrical, not mechanical, but bioelectrical organisms that and how they work matters, and it has a direct impact on the quality of your life. Where do you go to learn how to pay attention to your experience in such a way that you can integrate that information into what you do? It's almost completely missing in the culture. It's just get things done, accomplish, go, do, achieve. And the markers of achievement are disconnected from the quality of life that we want to have. And that's the difficulty, right? It's kind of like, oh, achievement means having a big house, and having a big career, and having a big name, and being celebrated as a success. And there's some goodness in that, to be sure. But it's not necessary. Those things are completely unnecessary in order to feel really deeply satisfied with your life. So it's optional suffering to say, if I don't have that, I am unhappy. Right? You don't ever hear about, oh, you can be completely content and delighted with your life and not be, quote unquote, successful these days. And I'm not advocating that that's what it should be. I'm just saying it can be. The mind alone, thinking, is not going to solve our problems. We need heart-informed activity engagement, heart, body, mind, integration. Those people who have done that work, when they bring those skills to the table of solving problems like how do we cure a virus, how do we build a city, how do we create legislation, how do we form a council, how do we educate children, things go better. Things go better. And that's what I'm here to do, is to help people do this integration work so that you can then go out and do your work in a better way that's more holistic, more integrated, facilitating your work as a coach to help other people do their work in whatever business that they're in. And there are skills involved with this. The rate of change to our world is faster than our capacity to adapt. I did a podcast with Dr. Ron Siegel a while back for the Institute of Organizational Science and Mindfulness. And that was a really great conversation. And he said that and really struck me. He tells a story about, our nervous systems were developed out in the savannah, right? Out millions of years of growing and maturing, evolving a nervous system that was connected to nature. And that is not a binary system. There's not 100,000 people trying to get your attention when you're living out in the wild. But that's how long it took for us to build the nervous systems that we have today, which developed in a completely different context than the one we live in. And the modern world is changed so fast. The rate of change is dramatically faster than the biomechanical processes that need to adapt to it. So consequently, we're centuries behind evolution in terms of what kind of nervous system do we need to have. Well, if we could freeze frame where we are right now and not do any innovation for maybe 100,000 years, our nervous systems would adapt to it. That's how much the lag is. And the numbers are just metaphorical, but the point is there's a tremendous amount of time it takes for our biomechanical system, biological systems to adapt to their contexts. It takes a long time. You will see generation to generation change, but those generations for us are, 60, not 60 years, but, 20, 30 years. So how many 20, 30-year generations do you need in order to see actual, measurable, structural change in our nervous systems to adapt to the context that we're in? And as a result, no one's really asking the question of, well, what do we do about that? What's the impact of all that change on us? And I think the answer goes back to this first slide, is that we're seeing a lot of suffering. The impact on our nervous systems is that we're feeling disconnected. This disconnection is rampant. It's people feel like, where's the meaning? What do I do with my world my life that has meaning? How do I get wired in? And that's the real difficulty, and one of the things that coaches can really help with. Specific skills happen, but we run into problems because you say, well, here's what you need to do. You need to connect. And so oftentimes meditation is the path to that. And so, and there's so much resistance to this notion that if you really want to go faster, slow down, really connect to who you are. And so how do you then organize an experience for your clients so that they can get what I mentioned before, this reference for the preference, this way that people can be better? That's not just an idea, it's a direct experience. How can you help them with that? Well, there are specific skills that you can help them learn, and there is a way to do this. I want to tell a quick story about an Aikido lesson that I learned, and I wasn't actually taking Aikido. This guy, Hiroshi, was one of the world's best Aikido masters. And I just happened to live in Boulder, Colorado, where his dojo is. And I was into all kinds of movement at the time, ecstatic dance and contact improv and martial arts. Although I wasn't formally studying martial arts, I still practiced because I had at one time formally studied it. And he offered a course on what he called Aikido movement. And this really stuck with me. And what this was he wanted to teach people who were not studying Aikido about movement in Aikido, the dynamics of movement, and what he knew about being in a body in space and time in a very masterful way, because he was a master at meeting other physical people and working with them in space. Like when someone's going to attack you in Aikido, it's like a meeting, and it's almost like a dance rather than a fight. You merge with the experience, and then something happens. All right? So you keep your center. It's very much about being centered and being in connection with your quote unquote opponent in this case. Now, you can use this metaphor for opposition, but you can also use it for collaboration. And so one of the first things he did was he got in right next to you, and he said, and he put his arm up, and he would just have you put your arm up right next to him. So it's like this. And he would just go, he'd look right straight at you. He goes, the body knows. Body knows. He's just go, and everybody's going, what? And what he was trying to say is that in his experience as a master of his craft, when he got skin to skin with somebody, he knew intrinsically what to do because the body was communicating body to body. And it wasn't an intellectual process. It was in the body. I thought, well, that's interesting. And then he taught the next thing, which was this movement where you just turn 360 degrees and you are paying attention to everything as you do, and you're keeping your center. Very powerful practice. And it's one of the basic moves in Aikido. And what he said really, really lit me up. And it said, if you learn this one thing, you will know all of Aikido. If you learn this one thing, this simple movement, you will master all of Aikido. And I thought, wait, what? Here's a guy who's like one of the 5 best on the planet, saying that if you do this thing and you do it really masterfully, you will learn a million other things. And I thought, well, that's amazing that there's such a thing as learning so many principles buried into the understanding of one practice. And I thought, wow. And it was the first time it occurred to me that there's such a thing called, I call it a foundational practice. And it's a practice that has built within it 1,000 other lessons. And so once you learn this foundational practice, it changes everything about your understanding of things. That was a big deal for me to understand. And so I wondered, what else is like this? This can't be the only example. This has to be something that's true about lots of things. There have to be foundational practices everywhere. And so I began to explore what are the foundational practices about communication, about connection, about collaboration, about coaching. What are those? And I think I went to learn from some of the best people on the planet, and I think I kind of put some of it together. And so some of the stuff that we're talking about here are those practices, like we started off with this transition. That is a foundational practice built within the capacity to transition from one thing to another on purpose, in the moment, non-judgmentally, which is the John Kabat-Zinn, framework for mindfulness. That is a perfect mindful moment. And built within that is the foundation for many, many, many things. You walk into a meeting, transition. I was out in the hall. I'm in a meeting now. What's this room feel like? What's the vibe here? Looking around, noticing who's sitting next to who, because there's a story there. who's sitting next to who? What's this? And not go, oh, there's got to be great meaning here, but just noticing. What's it like? Changes everything about the way you show up in that meeting. So that's what I mean by it's foundational. It changes everything. And these are the same practices that have been so powerful and positive in my life. So we're talking about somatic experience, reconnecting the brain, the body, the heart, the mind, the soul, the spirit. You can just kind of do the whole thing so that you can connect this more integrated experience of self can walk through the world empowered by your more full experience. And when you do that, by definition, you have a better experience. That doesn't mean that your problems go away, but the way you meet them changes dramatically. This isn't a thought process. This isn't a thought form. It's like, and that's the problem with coaches is marketing, right? How do you write all this down in such a way that you read it and go, oh, that sounds good. But when you experience it, it's not just, it sounds good. It's like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's an incredible, life-changing experience. And that's difficult to communicate in words. It has to be a somatic experience, right? So helping people as a coaches to have that experience, to notice what is going on under the thoughts, to integrate that information into your experience, make better decisions as a result of it, and express what's happening for you. And not my final, but one of my foundational questions is, what kind of world would it be if we all had those skills, if those were built into the structure of society? And my proposition is that we would have a crap ton fewer problems than the ones we have. And the worlds and the businesses we build would be better aligned to what do humans actually need, as well as be more sustainable. There'd be less focus on achievement and a lot more focus on enabling the people within the organization to thrive while being profitable. But in terms of like the measure of an economy would not just be dollars, it would also be well-being. And that would be a number that was a metric that we actually worked to improve. That's kind of the culture. That's the stock market that I want, right? I want to invest in well-being. Now, mindfulness and somatics are deeply connected. And so that's when I say I'm a mindful somatic coach, it means that I intentionally work mindfully to have a more somatic experience. And you can work, and the trick is you can work this backwards. You can go from a somatic experience to being mindful. Because here's a quote from Eckhart Tolle. He says, the body is always in the moment, which is true, right? It's always now. The body's never in the future. Your hand is not worried about what's going to happen tomorrow. It's not pissed off about what happened yesterday. You're always here now. Your body is always here now. So if I tune into my senses, it's always just giving me now, a reading on now, a reading on now. But am I paying attention to what's happening now? And this generally people aren't, because we're thinking, oh yeah, I'm having this experience where my knee really hurts, but really what I'm thinking about is whether or not I'm going to, get the raise that I want, or my car is going to work, or I'm going to make it my deadline, or whatever it is. Not that things are wrong, but we're disconnected from the experience of what's happening now. And you realize, oh, I probably need to shift my weight because my knee hurts. Or do something about that. So you can access somatically the moment. And when you combine your present awareness with that, you have a beautiful, mindful moment. And so a lot of the practices that I teach are about on purpose paying attention to your direct experience. And when you notice that you're doing that, you hang out there for a little while. In traditional mindfulness training, they'll also have you do these attention practices where you breathe and you just pay attention to your breath. You come back to paying attention to your breath over and over again. And that's building the same muscle, but and it takes, you have to sit down and practice it for 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes or more. There's nothing wrong with that. It's great to do, but a lot of people can't manage that these days because we're so distracted or busy. And so the practices I like to promote are what I call micro mindfulness practices that you can incorporate frequently. So one of the sayings in the method that I teach is frequency is more important than duration. So it's better to practice the piano 10 minutes a day, 7 days a week than for to sit down one time a week and do it for 70 minutes. So you're going to get further this way. And so the question is, what does it take to create neurological change? And the work that I've been doing, the methods that I'm using, they don't require a lot of time, but they do require effort and lots of small efforts. Because really what we're doing is we're building neurology. We're working with neuroplasticity. So somatic experiences are not thought processes. They're like, oh, I'm noticing my shoulders are tight. I feel a pressure in my chest or a knot in my stomach. Those are not, it's not a thought, it's an experience. And so when you help people to kind of learn to speak about their experience, you're really doing them a big favor. This slide might be a little hard to read, but there are lots of different kinds of somatic work in the coaching world, and I just felt like it was a good thing to create this slide and talk about, there's body work like Traeger and Rolfing and Feldenkrais and Alexander, amazing stuff. And then there's coaching and therapy, the one that I'm trained up in is Hakomi and recreation of the self, both of those. There's also focusing, generative somatics, Strozzi somatics, and aspects of nonviolent communications, which I'm a big fan of. All of those can be very somatically focused. And then there's focus on PTSD, trauma-based work, which can also be extremely somatic work. So sensory motor institutes, somatic experiencing, there's all different kinds of approaches. So there are forms of work out there. My own method, the Mindful Coach method, is a form of this as well in terms of coaching. So I've taken a lot of skills from therapy and adapted them for coaching context specifically. And so the really key question, why I framed this presentation as the difference, the future of coaching is somatic, is because a lot of coaches are out there doing really good work, but they're focusing on how you get things done, And so even within the IFS system, it's kind of like you lead with the question of what do you want to accomplish by the end of this session? That's a really good question because it helps keep you on point, but there's really intense focus on we're going to stay on the customer's agenda. And I'm in a position where that's a really good thing to do, but that assumes that the client knows where they want to go and how to get there and can speak those things when really what's in their way is something they cannot speak about because they don't have the skill yet to do it. And so my job is to help uncover and give voice to those things in a way that help them to unburden the blockages, release the blockages that are in their way that they can't even really name yet. So they want to get to a certain place, but they can't do it until you've addressed certain kinds of hurdles or you hit a swamp and you can't get past it because every time you start to reach out, you get overwhelmed with despair. Well, there's some therapy that can be helpful there, but you can also organize around resilience and stay in the coaching lane, and that's another skill for coaches. But helping the client immerse themselves in the dichotomy of the feeling of I want to reach out, but yet I get stuck. I want to get out, but yet I reach. And so here we have this dance. And if they're actually doing what I'm doing, I'm going to say, well, just Notice what it's like when you say, I want to reach out. What's it like? Slow that way down. What happens for you when you actually reach your arms out? I want to reach out. What goes on for you somatically? Oh, I just want to light up. I just want to embrace the world. Yeah, let yourself have that. What does that feel like for you? It feels so good. It reminds me of a time when I was playing as a kid, or oftentimes these things go back to these childhood places. And as a coach, I'm not so interested in healing the childhood wound as I am embracing the fact that they are lighting up, and let them inhabit a place where they understand that this part of them that wants to reach out and grow is core to who they are. And when they really get, yes, this is who I am. I'm someone who really lights up around creative expression or helping people or being a healer or being a business, whatever it is. And they own that somatically as a core part of who they are. They take a breath and relax into it and just let it be the truth of what it is. You immerse them. It's called a somatic immersion. You let them immerse into that experience. Then from there, you revisit the problem. And they say, how's this look now? And they go, oh, it just seems like it's so much smaller than it was before. It seems like from here, what's the issue? I feel so resourced. I feel so alive. And so I say in the work that I do, your problems don't go away. They just get smaller because you get bigger. And so you're facilitating the client inhabiting their authentic experience, expression of what's true for them, what lights them up. And that's really the first whole sequence of the work that I do. What lights you up? Now, why does this work so well? It's because, for one thing, I don't have to hear every detail about their life in order to land on that moment where they light up. Like in this example, they're going, I want to reach out. I'm going to say, what's that like? Reach out slow, really slow, and pay really close attention to what that's like. I'm suddenly I'm not getting all the facts about how this happened and that happened and how they didn't get the raise and so the person, and that can go on for months, getting all the details. We're cut through all that noise and gone straight to what is the truth of your somatic experience about the way you feel empowered. And we can get to the disempowered part, but we're going to focus as coaches on the part that is resilient, on the part that is empowering. And the other value of this is it's always relevant to the client in this moment because they brought it up. This isn't a suggestion. You're just like, well, I wonder about you, and what if about this, and could it be so that? Nothing wrong with that necessarily. But when the client is saying, well, I don't know what to do, and they're doing this with their hands, boy, that's gold for a somatic coach. So just slow that way down. Consider this. Sense into what's it like. Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it blue? Is it red? Does it have more energy? And then as you transition to this one, how does it feel? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it blue? Is one feel better than the other? And there's not a right or wrong. We're just exploring. And suddenly I'm completely out of the story and I'm into, they brought it up. This is directly relevant to them right now. And what happens when the client tunes their senses to this is the body provides information to the mind that wasn't there before, and they gain extraordinary insights that seem like revelations to them. It's like, oh, wow, I didn't realize. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that in my coaching sessions. It's like, I didn't realize that this felt so much richer to me. And this feels like fear. This feels like, whoa, yeah, I really want to go here. And this feels like, yeah. So which of these do you prefer? Well, let's go for the yeah. Yeah. So how does it feel to say yes to that? I just want to relax. It feels so great. And suddenly you have a client in a completely different experience. And you haven't really even gotten into the details of what this is. And they've already had these amazing insights, and it really can happen like that. And it can be extremely satisfying as a coach whenever they look at you and they go, oh, God, thank you so much for helping me have this insight. So there's satisfaction, there's improving the quality of life and resilience, there's differentiation. Not a lot of coaches can do this kind of work. So you begin to set yourself apart as a coach, as someone who can facilitate this deep work. And it's healing. We're really talking at some level about healing, helping people be more whole. And it's also really efficient. I mean, you really get to stuff quickly this way often. So just as a quick example, it's like the standard questions a coach might ask versus a somatic approach to coaching. Client says, well, I had a really bad feeling coming away from that conversation. They turn their head away and they go, yeah, I really had a bad feeling about that conversation. So a typical coach, and this is, I'm not saying this is bad or wrong, but a good coaching question might be, well, what could you have said that might have made a difference? And you're helping them explore. A somatic coach is going to notice that they're turning their head away and they're saying, and they're feeling things. They're expressing what in my work I call a limbic state shift. They're like, that was really felt bad. And they're turning away. It's almost like, right? You can feel it. I'm going to name that. Well, that sounds hard. Yeah, that was hard. Now, I'm not asking for details. I'm not saying, tell me what happened. I'm saying, I'm aligning and communicating that I'm paying attention to the feeling the coach is having or the client is having and saying, I'm tracking you. I'm paying attention to how you're doing as well as what you're saying. And that helps create authentic rapport. They're going to notice that you are tracking, you're paying attention, you're noticing how they're feeling. I can tell you from personal experience, I've paid good money for some therapists who I'm sitting there and I'm almost in tears and they're just asking me, so what about that? And what about this? And I'm like, can't you see I'm suffering here? And they don't look up and go, are you like tearful now? I'm like, yeah, and I have been for 10 minutes while you've been in your thoughts around what should I say next. And I feel completely disconnected from them, even though they're supposed to be all that, It's like they're not doing the job. They're not connecting with me. This is the opposite of that. This is connecting and doing the job. So I'm going to say, that sounds hard. And then I'm going to potentially lead with this thing. Then you turn away. So what's happening right there? What's that movement where you turn away and you kind of hunch over? What's happening? In that case, we're kind of leaning into the bad feeling a little bit. I don't like to do that too much as a coach, but it can be a lead into the next piece, which we won't get into right now. Another example might be a client says, I don't know why I don't speak up in meetings. And they kind of shift. I don't know why I don't speak up. And they kind of like bring their shoulders up. I don't know why I don't speak up. Or sometimes they'll go, I don't know why I don't speak up. And they'll put their hand up by their throat. It's pretty common. And so a traditional coach might say, well, what might help you be more willing to speak? Perfectly fine question. But it's an intellectual. Well, I think this and I think that, maybe this, maybe, and those might be very useful. But a somatic coach is going to go, can you feel that moment, what it's like for you when you don't speak? Yeah, what's it feel like? And they go, I don't know. I just feel like I start to tighten up. And so do you notice anything physically or emotionally? Say, yes, like I start to feel like there's like a hand right here. And you have to be really a little bit careful when it comes to like feeling like choking, because sometimes those can be PTSD sort of signifiers. But if you can focus a little bit on the contraction, then you can also get to a place where you realize that what's on the other side of that is the desire to be heard. The reason they're feeling this contraction is because they want to express themselves. And if you connect to what is it in you that wants to be heard, now we've moved from the pain to the gain. We're working for what is the excitement in you that is worth risking this feeling. And you align them with, yeah, do you deserve to be heard? Yes, of course. Oh my God. Yeah, I have so much to say. Yeah, you do, don't you? Yes, I have so much. And then you let them land and experience, I'm someone who has a lot to contribute. You ground them in that identity, and then whenever they begin to speak, it comes from a completely different place, and then they are heard because it's coming from a deeply connected place within them. There's another example here, real quickly. I just want to break out of this rut. What would it be like if you broke out of this rut? Is a traditional coaching question. What would your life be like? And then another somatic approach might be, let's do a little experiment. And then you invite the client. Oh yeah, this was an example where I just want to break out. They're like breaking and they show you they're breaking like breaking a stick. And that's somatic gold. If you ever see that, it's kind of like, well, let's just do that really slow. What's it like for you? Oh man, it's like, it feels so freeing. Yeah. Oh, let that, yeah. Embody that, yeah. And that's what I call somatic embodiment. So I've been riffing a long time, and you can tell I get all excited about this. Yes, Rob.
Yeah, hi. I have a question about how quickly with a client you would get into those kinds of observations like you did with Barbara, and if sometimes you experience pushback or if a person might withdraw from being observed
Yeah,
so
that's a great
intimately.
question.
Yeah, so
So
quickly.
you have to kind of gauge like what what you're trying to do. So what you're naming here is a skill I call tracking the connection. Tracking the connection. And as a coach, you don't want to overreach. You want to be alert to not overreaching. Now, for those of you that might be watching this for the first time, Barbara and I have a history. We've known each other for a while, and so there's a comfort level there. But when you're dealing with a new client, it's a totally legit question. Like, what can I say? What can I do? But even with somebody you don't know very well, like I've been doing a whole lot of new sessions with people, and so when you meet people for the very first time and you notice that they're frazzled, even if you're not trying to go deep to the core issues, you can just say, that sounds hard. Or that must be frustrating. Just very simple, very human, very obvious, I'm going to call it obvious, kind of context statement, so that you're naming exactly the experience that they're having. And it doesn't feel like you're not overreaching. You're not saying, well, that sounds like it must be some core wounding from when you were abused as a child. It's not like you're going deep here. You're just staying with the moment. Wow, that's really exciting for you, huh? Yeah. And what you're looking for is what I call a somatic yes, a somatic affirmation. They go, yeah. Yes. And don't be afraid to be wrong either. Like if they go, no, that's not quite it. So, okay, great. I always celebrate that. Yeah, that's great. I'll appreciate that. So is it more like something? And I'll rephrase what they're saying in a way till I get alignment with them. And if you never get alignment with them, they might not be the client for you. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Yeah, with Barbara, I can kind of take a bigger step than I can with some other people. But so you have to read, like, are they accessible? Are they okay? Most people, if they're reasonably emotionally healthy people or normal, and are going to respond well to you naming the experience that they're having, as long as it's not an invasion, so you don't go too far. And I learned that by overreaching. I've been in sessions where I've overstepped, and you will not. And what happened, that damages the relationship to a certain degree. You will find they will pull back. And then you just have to name this. Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to overstep, overreach. And it's really important to say something like, we'll take this at the rate you're comfortable with. I don't have an agenda here. I'm really just trying to understand you. And those are because those people are going to back up going, I need to be defensive. They're trying to get in there, and they don't trust you yet, right? So trust has to be earned. But in my experience, this is the way you earn the trust, is by naming these small things and then demonstrating that you care and that you can be helpful. Any other questions? All right, let me go back to my slide deck here. There are some simple things that even if you're not a somatic coach or you don't consider yourself a somatic coach, that you can do. And I promise to give some specific takeaways in the session. One of them is the transition piece that we did before. Even if you don't make it a big deal, you can help people transition into a more relaxed state. Like if somebody's coming in and they're all wired up, you can say, hey, would it be okay if we just take a breath for a moment and just pause and relax for a minute? It can be really helpful, particularly at the first of a session. But if you're noticing the client is really ramped, I mean, they're activated and they can't slow down, then you need an intervention of some kind, because I don't think it helps clients for them to come into a session super activated and to leave super activated. As a mindful somatic coach, our job is to help regulate this nervous system, other people's nervous systems. In some ways, our nervous system is a proxy, is a learn. There's this thing they call empathy neurons. And if someone has ever walked in the room and they're really agitated, unless you really have your center together, you're going to start being a little agitated yourself. And on the flip of that, if you're really anxious and you walk in the room and somebody's really present, you start to calm down. And so our job as coaches is to be as present as we can. So when we engage with clients who are kind of nervous and activated, their system is co-regulating based on yours. We are built that way by design. That's how babies learn to regulate their nervous system. We are wired that way. You cannot help it. So the people who say, oh, I do this all myself, I'm completely self-made, I don't depend on anybody, that's not the way humans are built. And they just haven't matured to the level where they understand that we live in a co-created system. So box breathing, look up box breathing is a really powerful way that it's hard to say no to because the Navy SEALs do it. And because the Navy SEALs do it, then it's okay for even for people who are, oh, I don't want anything to do with mindfulness. Well, the SEALs do this. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I'll try that. So it's like, learn box breathing and give that to your clients as a way to help them calm down. Very powerful, works beautifully for most people. And you can take people through this in real time in your sessions. Just 5 minutes can change it. And then you have the real example of this reference for the preference that we talked about. How do you feel now? Oh, I'm so much better. Yeah, this is something you can do on your own. Yay. Another one is if your throat, I feel like I choke up at meetings, I don't want to speak. If your throat could speak on its own, what would it say? If your heart could say something, if your stomach, which was in a knot, if it could say something, what would it say? So you can ask your body parts, your somatic experience to speak. If your shoulders could speak, what would they say? It's a strange thing to ask for, but the mind can do that. And the body will actually offer information. I had a very beautiful session the other day with a guy who was envisioning an iron gate. And I just said, what does the iron gate want to say to you? And they had a whole dialogue with this iron gate, which began to relax. And at the end of it, it transformed into, a caring other who was just trying to help him. It was a beautiful experience for him. We engaged in this dialogue. And another one is, you've seen me do it a couple of times in this session where I've said, like, take this experience, I want to reach out and slow it way down. Or the breaking, slow it way down. Or the I don't know what I want to do. Slow it way down, way slower than people think. When you ask people to do this, it can be a little awkward sometimes, but people get into it pretty quick, actually, if they get the vibe of it. And the trick is to get them to do it slower than they want to do it. You have to get them to really sense into it. And then you get really quiet and you wait for meaning to emerge, insight to emerge. Don't offer. Now, if they get quiet for like 5 minutes, you can say, bring me along here, tell me what's happening. But don't be afraid to be still and wait for that to happen. So these are techniques that you can use, and they'll be part of the deck. They'll be part of this presentation that you can use. And so wrapping up here, just this one thing. If you can help clients learn how to express their feelings, their thoughts, their experiences that are happening in the moment and give voice to that, just that one thing, this is like the foundational practice, right? Can change so much in a person's professional and personal life. Just asking them to speak about what is their experience now. And as a coach, you want to be tracking, well, what's it like for you to right now to experience that? Well, it's like the time I was at my mother's house and blah, blah, blah. That's a thought, not an in the moment experience. It's like this, but it's not. Because right now it's like, it's a different experience is what I'm having right now. So not that that's wrong, but sometimes you'll ask, people don't have skills with this, so you'll ask this question, what's your experience now? And they'll tell you a story about something else because they don't have the skills yet to say, like Barbara just did so beautifully, like, I'm taking a real risk here and it feels challenging but fun. That's a really nice statement about the in-the-moment experience. So just that, if you do nothing but that, that's a big win. I have all this kind of the stuff we're talking about wrapped up in a training I call the Mindful Coach Method. And so if you're interested in taking this to a learning context where for 8 weeks we practice this, and here's what it looks like. It's, we work on the coaching container, like creating the relationship. Then we work on the coaching intent. And I mentioned this, like helping the client identify with who they really are and giving voice to that. Through this process of paying attention, contact statements, somatic inquiry. Is it red? Is it blue? Does it feel like this? Is it this? What's it like for you? And then let that be so. Let that goodness that you feel be so. And then insight emerges spontaneously. You don't provide it. That is so powerful for the customer. And you just keep going around this circle, around all the issues that the client brings to you. And they bring these issues to you. You don't provide them. So they're always relevant and they're always super powerful. And this I call the Mindful Coach Method. And I'm starting this course in about 2 weeks, actually. And so some of you here have taken it and others who may be listening, and some of you here have not. And so if you're interested, that's starting. It's 8 weeks. It's 8 weeks of one-on-one plus pre-recorded material. It's the best I can do to give you a foundation in these somatic skills, and they're really super powerful. So I invite you to check that out at themindfulcoachmethod.com. And I will be sending everybody here a little code that you could use to get 20% off the price because you showed up for the webinar, and for those who are listening that signed up for the webinar. So I invite you to check it out. Look at the reviews that are there for the people that have taken the course. Okay, well, I'd just like to say thank you all for showing up. It's always great I love talking about this, as you can tell, and I really appreciate it. For those of you listening, if anybody's interested in the Mindful Coach Method, you can just reply to the email that you will receive about this, or check it out at themindfulcoachmethod.com. I'm happy to meet with you to see if it's a good fit, or you can just look at the stuff online here. And blessings to you. We'll hope to see you soon. The Mindful Coach Podcast.